Yeah. So my name is Jakob Gottlieb Svendsen. I come from Copenhagen in Denmark. Work for a company called CT Global, and I'm a consultant in automation, of course, doing a lot of orchestrator, then SMA, then Azure automation. Yeah, you can see the rest of the details here, and of course, when you download these slides afterwards. I don't have many slides though. So what we are going through is first gonna present you to this guy I call Mr. Brick, who is the robot. Then we're gonna control him from the cloud. We're gonna do self-service. We're gonna do a mobile app and putting it all together in the end. And actually, I think there was an issue here because this slide deck is not correct. I had a crash, just a little while ago. Sorry, yeah, that doesn't matter actually. Well, but I also have a Google Assistant or Google Home, which is this device here. So we're gonna play around with that too. And I can try to do a tease first so you can see how that works and we can see if you can actually hear it. So, hey Google, ask PowerShell conference to get the latest tweet.
Sure, here's the test version of PowerShell Conference.
This is the latest tweet about PowerShell Conference Europe. The tweet is positive. The tweet is posted by Mateusz Czernowski. And so we start Full House for at Rubicon and hashtag PSCONFEU. I've been waiting for this a long time. https://t.co/virtual.
All right. So, this is just a tease. I'm going to talk more about how that was done later. And we're going to, of course, try to combine it with the Lego robot. First of all, I would like to introduce my robot here, Mr. Brick. And it's not something I made myself. It's actually the starter kit from Lego Mindstorms. The only thing I've added is a little Wi-Fi adapter here so that I can control it via Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi adapter can either be from Lego or you can buy the same adapter directly from Netgear. So here is the actual, the information if you need it afterwards. And of course, when I bought this robot in 2012, I think, it was because I wanted to try and do it from PowerShell. And I asked my boss, hey, don't we need a Lego robot in the office? And he said, yes, buy 2. So we bought 2. Since then, I've been doing a lot of presentations with the robot. But then I had 3 presentations in a row where it didn't work. So I thought, okay, my luck is up. I can't do this robot stuff anymore. So after a few years, people started asking, hey, why didn't you bring the robot? So I started doing sessions again. But this time, I'm not relying on the Wi-Fi network at the conference because that was the issue I had. So I'm relying on my cell phone instead. So all I need is 3G or 4G connection. So I have internet, of course, and then everything is connected to that cell phone, except the Google Home I just put on the presenter's network. So that it just needs internet. I have a little device here also. Let's see. Yep. But I'll get to that in a second. First of all, we need to see how we can actually control Mr. Brick. So what I did, of course, was to search the internet for a .NET library for Lego Mindstorms, and there was one already. That was great. So I only needed a few lines of PowerShell with that library to actually control the robot. And of course, I could make a module of it, and I will soon, which I say every time, of course. But I just want to show how easy it actually is. So I downloaded the library. It's this DLL file called desktop, a Lego EV3 desktop. And what you do here is just to make a communication object. There is also Bluetooth communication, which I used in the beginning, but it took like 1 minute for the robot to move. And 1 minute is a long time when you don't know if your code works or not and you're on stage. So I started doing, okay, let's try network instead. That's also more reliable. And of course, if you are setting up something like this in a permanent installation, like at home or whatever, you could, of course, give it a permanent IP address. In my case, it doesn't have it, so I have to send the IP address into the actual script. So you see here, I have some parameters here, IP address. I have how many centimeters it should move. And I have 2 actions, grab and release, which it can do. So I can call this runbook on my local, this code on my local machine, which is connected to the robot, or I could do it on this machine too, actually, as long as I have a network connection. So after you create a connection object, you use that connection object to create a brick object, which is the actual controller there. And from there on, all we need to do is to, well, I do a little check if it actually connected. But then you just send direct commands. There's some motors on this. It has 2 motors here and 1 in the middle. And you just send some kind of number. Oh, how many steps this motor should move. Like this is B and C, so that's the wheels, which I chose to connect to that. And you then give it steps. And I've then calculated that if I time a centimeter with 35, then it's about the right length. So that's why I can send in centimeters, convert it to steps, and then move the robot. Wait a second, because it looks better. And then depending on the action, I can either move the motor 50 steps, or I can move it minus 50 steps. So that means one way or the other way. And yeah, to make sure it stopped, I put in a stop motor command. It's actually not necessary, but I experienced in some cases that it wouldn't stop. Actually, if I forget to take it out of a specific test menu here, it won't stop, and it just goes over the edge of the table, which has happened like 5 times in presentations. It looks fun, but the robot doesn't like it that much. I mean, it's also missing some bricks, and yeah, it's been traveling the world, so they look kind of weird at you when you go through customs sometimes. Why do you bring a Lego robot? I'm on a business trip. Yeah, right. Right. So as you can see, it's actually super simple to control the robot. There's nothing more needed than this. So as I said, very soon I'm gonna package this into a module so that the DLL file, in this case, I just point at a specific location for the DLL file, but I would then package into the module, of course. So I can try and execute it here. That's the little machine I have right there that kind of looks like a Raspberry Pi, but it's much more than that. And we can try and execute this. And then I should, of course, remember what IP address it got. Just checking to be sure. All right. There we go. Let me just see something here. So just for length in centimeters, and then I need my new analog device here. So we'll measure 40, and then I'll try to see if I can actually hit that thing, because it can actually be a little difficult. There we go, 40 centimeters. 40. And then action should be grab. Oh, grab. It loads the thing, and it goes completely to the side, right? Well, it was a good first try. So you see it catches it here, like, wow, amazing. And then... we'll try again. just to, and I'm so lazy, so I will. You see, it actually sends out, responses to whatever we send to it. Let's just do 20 and then a release. Yep. And then I, of course, forgot that I should start a new PowerShell each time, new session, which we can, of course, try. Yeah. New PowerShell tab. Whoa, thank you. What? Did I do the wrong value? Nope, I always check because it looks stupid when it doesn't work like it just did. Try again. I mean, what usually happens if this fails as it does now is because sometimes of the Wi-Fi, right? If I had a real Wi-Fi, it would probably be better. But it will be much better when we trigger it from Azure Automation, because it creates a new process every time and everything is new, so it will work every time. But since Azure Automation is in the cloud, I need to execute this on my local network. That's why I have this little server here, which actually runs Windows 10, and it runs what's called the hybrid worker, which is connected to automation here. So this means that I can start a job from up here. And now I should actually copy-paste the IP address to somewhere where I can get it easily, because I need it a number of times. Good old Notepad, right? Yes. Best editor out there. 20 and release. But I can choose here to run in Azure. That doesn't work, right? Because it doesn't have VPN to Azure. But I can choose to run in my Danish data center or home, which is that one. And it just shows that it's really simple. You don't need much. You just have a Wi-Fi here, a Windows machine there, and I can connect it up there, so that it's much easier for me to integrate from different things. It queues the stuff here, and then it picks up the job in a second. And again, that's sometimes a bit slower because it's through the cell phone. The SLA is 30 minutes, yeah. So, if anybody wants to take a little break, then... Actually, when you run it on hybrid worker, it usually starts very quickly. I mean, within seconds, it's a bit slower because of that Wi-Fi. And you see, sometimes it does start. Yep, and now it's running. And hopefully I didn't break the robot. I tested it a million times, right? And when you're on stage, it's sometimes a little unstable. Running. Come on, little robot. Ah, damn it. Is anybody trying to hack my Wi-Fi? No. What we'll do here is to actually restart this one. And sorry for the video. We'll wait a little before we actually execute the robot. I'll just get back to it in a second. Just to introduce you to the little machine I have here. It's a Udo x86, which is a Intel x86 board with a quad-core processor, and they say in the benchmark test that it's about 10 times as fast as a Raspberry Pi 3. So it runs Windows Server easily, or Windows 10. It also has built-in Arduino, so we have Arduino outputs and also Windows GPIOs and so on. And it actually has 3 digital outs, so you can put 3 4K screens on it. So it's actually a pretty powerful little device with an M2 disk in the bottom of it. And we'll turn that on again. So that's what I'm using as, and as I said, it has pins out for Intel or for x86 input-output, but also Arduino pins All right. So, Mr. Brick from the cloud, that was actually what I tried to show before. Yep, but let's try to do some self-service. So, how many here are fans of SharePoint? One, yes. What we want to do is to make a portal, and I want to make a quick portal that I can easily trigger this thing, and I can make it from the scratch in a few minutes. So, SharePoint Online is my preferred place to do that. I want to trigger Azure Automation because I want to run it on my hybrid worker and make it sure the robot hopefully runs again, unless it's, I don't know, a drama queen or something, and tries to mess up my demo. So let's try it. I'll just turn on the Wi-Fi here again. It's so nice that it doesn't remember Wi-Fi's, so I have to type it in every time, which is why I'm not using the presenter's Wi-Fi, because any presenter that knows the password knows that it's like 40 characters long, and it would take an age to try to put in using this little interface here. All right. When we want to trigger from SharePoint the Azure Automation, we have a number of options. One is to use Microsoft Flow. How many have tried Microsoft Flow? Yeah, I think it's actually pretty cool. I mean, there is more complex and maybe also more efficient ways to integrate stuff, but Microsoft Flow makes it extremely easy and actually nice to look at also. I don't even have any lights up here, so just a second. There we go. There we go. And I think we'll actually move this over here. Yeah. Another thing is to make a logical app. Logical app is actually almost, or is the same engine, from what I know, as Microsoft Flow. It just is a more complex interface where you can do a bit more. And Microsoft Flow is very focused on a person that makes, or a team that makes a flow for something they want to do, while Logical Apps is easier to use in an enterprise situation where you have multiple teams and so on. You can also make a SharePoint workflow the good old way, which was the way I did before Flow came along. And the great thing about SharePoint workflow is that it's SharePoint calling Azure Automation. It's not any system polling for new events or anything like that. Okay, so what I want to do is to make a self-service portal or form where we can order the robot to go somewhere. But we need to approve that this robot goes anywhere, because otherwise it probably go over the side of the table. Oh yeah, it's back online. Here we go. Then we trigger Mr. Brick on premises via the wireless. Okay. So let's go to SharePoint. This is my team site. It's a completely standard SharePoint Online. And if I want to create a new form, what I want to do is to make a list, and this list contains a number of columns, which means we can input items into that list using a form. And when there's a new item, I want to trigger the robot. So I make a new list here. We'll call it Mr. Brick PS Conf 2018. So that next year when I do the exact same demo, I can do a 2019. No. Here we go. So basically what we have now is a list, and it has at least what we can see, one column called title. But we can actually click here and I can just add more columns, such as IP address. And I could actually put in some kind of validation. There is also special SharePoint validation there. I don't want to go into that. And as I said, if this was a permanent installation, you would probably have the IP address saved somewhere, like in the default, in the assets, what's called shared resources now in Azure Automation, for instance. All right, we'll make a choice, which is action, and we'll call it grab or or release, of course. Release, like that. And we say that. Then we'll make length in centimeters. Oh, I should do that as a number here, because since I created my runbook here as an integer as the input, when I have to map the fields from SharePoint to via Flow to the runbook or PowerShell script here, it actually has to be a number. So we'll make a number here. Length in centimeters. There you go, and we can also make one called result if we want to, so that we can write back to it and say if this was successful or not. So there we go. We have a list, and maybe this title is always there, but I don't really want to see it. So let's just hide that column like that, and that's fine. And we'll apply that. Now we have a list. So this could be used for anything. I mean, this is just a robot. It could be ordering, any kind of administrative task. What we have used it for sometimes is at multiplication. That's at public schools or at schools in general. They have supporters walking around, and they have to actually reinstall a classroom, for instance. Or you could give the teacher control to actually stop or open the internet. Some stuff like that, which are like administrative actions you want to do. But luckily, when we have the list, we can easily click New, and we actually have a form here already. We could go in and customize the form and make it more pretty if we wanted to, but right now we'll just leave as is. And you see the one with the choices is just the two choices that are available. All right, so now we have the actual form. So I want to make the integration to my Azure automation, where I have the runbook new robot flow here, which is the same code as I ran locally before. So what I do is I just click on flow, and I say create new flow. And I could either choose to have like a empty flow, start from there, or I can choose one of these templates. Which one of them says start approval when new item is added. Perfect. That's almost what I want. So we'll just take that one as the base here and extend that. So a flow can trigger whenever there's a new item. It can trigger when there's an updated item on this list. And this might be the most GUI-heavy PowerShell session ever, but you'll see that it's actually fairly easy. I've made like connections in Flow to my SharePoint, to my Office 365, different things you can set up so that these connections are available. And then it creates this flow, which is I'll just call it PSConf 18. Start approval. And again, I'm still running from my cell phone. So actually, I had like 70 megabits yesterday, which was pretty good, but it's not always so stable. Come on. Of course, it's much slower now than ever before. I also have my email here, so you can see that when I get the, all right, come on. Maybe it's faster to write it yourself. No. But as I said before, this is my most important tool because I once forgot it when I went to the US, and they only had one that showed inches. So I had to recode my PowerShell script on stage to make it work with inches instead of centimeters to not make the robot go over the edge. Okay. Let's just try and save it. Actually, what I'll do is I'll switch to the presenters network instead. And you see better. So it has already created this basic flow, which says when a new item is created, and I could go to edit and edit which list and what items and so on. Start an approval, send to who? Well, send to my demo email address. And we'll just edit this. Here we go. But you can see we can actually put in fields from the list. For example here, review title. Well, I wasn't really using title, so we could change this to action, for instance, and we just click here, and now we have that value instead. So it sends this approval, and then it comes back, waits here until it receives an answer, and then it goes either one way or the other way. So if it's yes, it'll go here, send an email to the creator, so that you know that it's approved, and then we want to trigger the robot. So I'll add an action here, which is called create job. There's a lot of actions in here that you can do different things. Some of them are for Azure automation. So we'll just use the create job action right there. And then it's just a matter of choosing the right account. Okay, well. Or I could write it, of course. I could also use inputs from somewhere if I wanted to make a drop-down of where they wanted to execute it. There's many options here. Here we go. Here's my resource group. So I'll select my resource group for automation account. And I select my account. And we select the robot runbook, which is this one. And then I'll say yes to wait for the job to finish. But you see, as soon as I select the runbook, it pops up with the parameters. So I can, super simple, just select the parameter and then go and say, okay, what do we want here? This is IP address, so we'll take the IP address field. And the action one, we'll take the action field value here. And then you'll see when I select length in centimeters, it only shows the one field that is a number. So we'll add that one. And that's actually all I have to do to actually make a self-service portal for my robot. The last thing I want to do is to update my my item. SharePoint, update item. Here we go. But in this case, I can actually go and say, okay, it's this SharePoint, and what is the list name? Don't show again. That is psconf there. What is the ID? And I need the ID from the actual trigger in the beginning. But as you see right here, it actually automatically, each of the steps in the flow post, some kind of result. And this one called new item created, which was there in the beginning, it posts the ID of our item. So that's super easy. I'll click there, use that ID. And then it wants a title, because it's set to required. Of course, I should have removed that. We'll just call it demo. And then the result, we'll call it success. And of course, I could continue and make one on the other side if it wasn't approved, or if something fails, I could check if the actual create job was successful or not, and actually write success or failed. But to keep it as simple as possible here, I'll just leave it like this. Here we go. So now it's actually ready, but I actually forgot one thing because I had to execute on the hybrid worker group called home. So if I'm just triggering this without defining any hybrid worker group, well, then it will execute in Azure, which doesn't have contact to my robot. So we'll just go in here in advanced options, and you'll see there is a hybrid worker group field where I just can write the name of that hybrid worker group. And now it's actually ready. So if I go here, let's try and order it to move. And it still has it in the hand, of course. what you can see here, if I click the flow, is a run history. And I just open this so that you can see that it's triggering quite fast. So I do the new item here. New. We'll take our IP address. We can call it demo 1, IP address, action, release, length 20, and no result. As I said, you could make a nicer form if you wanted to by customizing it up here. But as soon as I save this item, there we go, I go here, and it triggers, sometimes within a few seconds, sometimes it takes half a minute maybe, and sometimes it's usually just the GUI here that doesn't update as fast as if we were refreshing. You see it's already running here. So I can click the instance that are running, I can see where it is in the process. It has finished the first step, has reached the approval, so there should be a mail on the way. So we'll go here, and we'll wait for the email, which usually also comes very quickly. It's probably already here. Yeah, there we go. And of course, this is the standard email, but you can define how it should, which text should be where. You can put in dynamic text if you are reading something from some source, or whatever you want to do. We'll approve this. Yes, please work. Something like that. Yeah, and we'll submit this, and I'll switch quickly back to this, because if it was, you see it has already, it found it already there, went here, finished that, now started the job in automation. But as I said, it's supposed to wait for the job, so of course it's not completing right away. But if I switch to my automation count, you'll see that there is already a job made here. And the inputs, of course, is the inputs that, if I map them correctly, of course, is the input fields I made in my form, in my SharePoint. And then, again, we'll wait for the actual runbook worker to pick it up, and just check that I didn't forget to do anything. There we go. Yep. There we go, starting. Running, that's good. You can see the output of the runbook if you want to. It's not the fastest robot in the world. Come on. It's usually much faster. Still running. Let's just see here, everything is correct. Maybe there's suddenly too many Wi-Fis. That's usually what happens when this. No, why doesn't it run? Okay. We'll switch back to the network of my cell phone. Whoa. Yeah. have some issues with the Wi-Fi, it seems. My connection from here to there is extremely slow. That is weird. Okay. Anyway, it should have triggered here. So let's just try once more. Why is it so slow? I blame Android. Okay, I'll just do one thing here. Restart the phone. But I'll continue and we'll trigger the robot again in a second. Because what we can do with this is, of course, to make different kinds of self-service for anything. So one thing I promised you to see, and we'll do that while this starts up, and I'll get back to the robot again, is to talk about the actual Google Home and the assistant here. So the assistant...
My apologies. I don't understand.
You should watch out what you say. I do have an Alexa too, and I try to get them to speak to each other, but you can only have them speak for like a minute, and then they have some kind of infinite loop protection or something in Alexa, which stops responding. That was actually quite fun. Yeah. But the way you do it in... the first thing you do when you do this Google Home stuff, and the reason why I didn't bring the Alexa is that it, at least when the first version that I used was very complex to do these integrations. I mean, what you would have to respond was like a huge JSON with different conversation IDs and different things. So the old demo I had was built in C#, so I thought, okay, this is PowerShell conference, I don't want to have only C# stuff. So let me make something for the actual, for the Google Home instead. Because the Google Home, at least one of the SDKs that you can choose when you create it in Google here, is super simple. So what you do is you create a project in Actions on Google, or the Action Console is called, console.actions.google. This, for example, the Get Tweets, which I showed before, what I've created is an app here, and in the overview I can actually set up stuff like the name of the app, what should it respond to. You see, I call it PowerShell Conference, put in pictures if I wanted to. At least it forced me, so I just put in some quick picture, different websites and so on. Then you create an action, and the action can either be done by a SDK with the command line, or you can use what's called Dialogflow. And I am using Dialogflow in this case. So you see that the action here is a fulfillment tool, Dialogflow. So this action in Dialogflow, oh yeah. They have some new security, and you know when they ask for permissions, you just accept anything, share any information with anyone. But you create an action in here, and it's actually really simple to do. And what I want to do is to have that action call an Azure function, which is PowerShell based, and then this function does whatever, in this case, getting the latest tweet, and then it should respond back to the Google Home here. So what you do is create this Dialogflow action, and then you type in, what is the, let's remove that. Type in what is the different phrases that you could say to trigger this action, like get news, get tweets, get PowerShell news, get latest tweet, and so on. Inside your Dialogflow in fulfillment, you set up the connection to the actual Azure function. How many of you have used Azure functions? Okay, so I should just show that first. An Azure function is a really quick, actually web service, or it can also have other triggers than an HTTP trigger. But if you create an HTTP trigger version like I did, it's a web service where you already have everything, like a URL, you have authentication via code and stuff like that. So when you create a function, you can actually select experimental languages, and you can select PowerShell. And that's what I did here. And I get a URL for this function right there. This means I can send information to that URL, and I can read it in my PowerShell here, and then I can return some information back to whatever calls this thing. So what I do here is I've actually used the base example where you get the the input here. This is already there when you start the project. In this case, I wanted to use a PowerShell module to actually go and invoke Twitter API so I can search for new tweets. And yeah, here's some codes. It's just a read account for a demo account, so it doesn't really matter if anybody misuses them. What I've done is to create a read-only access to a Twitter account, and that's the codes we have here. So I can then do whatever, trigger Twitter, read the tweet, and actually I also trigger this sentiment thing. And this is actually stolen directly from a script which was also used by Rob Sewell to create this Power BI, if anybody's seen that. So we can check if the tweet is positive. Luckily, I haven't had any negative ones yet in any tests, or neutral. They're always positive, so people are happy here, it seems. When we are done with doing whatever we want to do in our function, what we need to do is to return information for the Google Home or the Google Assistant, because this is not just Google Home. I can do it from my phone, or I can do it in my car because my phone is connected to the car with Android Auto. So it's not just the Google Home. You make something for the Google Assistant, and then it works on all devices. What I have to respond is something called the fulfillment text. Right there. So I create a hash table with the text that it should say, and then I convert it to JSON, and then I send the response back using, again, this is part of the start template when you create a function, how to return this result. So that's all I needed, was to do something to get whatever I need to return, and all I have to do is to return this fulfillment text JSON with a text string, and then she or he, depending on what I choose, will then speak. Meanwhile, everything should be up and running again, so let's go here. All right. Oops. Come on. So if anybody is running any Wi-Fi's, please shut them off. Because I don't know why this suddenly... I'm not used to so many people, maybe that's the issue. Yeah, it doesn't really log on. Oh. Anyway, we'll try it. So let's try and order one for directly here. There we go. Wi-Fi worked again, and then this also works much faster. So, pretty confident now. Let's just run it from the cloud here into my home. We'll trigger here. So, what I use Azure Automation and a hybrid worker for in production is because it's so easy to put up one of these hybrid workers in any of your environments or customers' environments. It's so easy to trigger something from a central place. It could be from an ITSM system like ServiceNow, triggering a runbook that then runs in a specific environment, doing whatever we need it to do. So that is what I really like about having this cloud service that is then hybrid and easily to integrate into your own environment. Yep. Come on, robot. There we go. So, what was the issue here? The issue was my phone. It's too old, it's 2 years old. I mean, I once used a protector, but now I stopped using it because then it hopefully breaks at some point. This one is a Sony Xperia. But actually, I really like the Sony Xperia phones. It's not that, but it's still using the micro USB, and I really like the USB-C instead. It's much more. Yeah, so back to what we were doing here. I actually need to take my phone, but I think we'll do that in a second. Because what I want to do first, since I know that everything is working now, I don't want to. I think maybe the issue could be that I was running a mirror screen program, and that program uses a lot of CPU power on the phone. So maybe that was why the Wi-Fi was extremely slow. But let's try and do an integration between the actual Google Assistant and the robot. So what to do here? Well, what I want to do is to trigger the runbook. Well, I have two choices. I could either make a function that goes to SharePoint and creates an item, and that would be great for documentation and so on, so that we could see that it was actually ordered in this case, but that would take a little bit longer to execute, of course, because then the flow executes and I would do approval and all that. So in this case, I'll just do a direct to a runbook that then executes executes the robot. So what I've done is to make a new runbook that receives what's called webhook data, because in Azure Automation on the runbooks you can set up a webhook. And a webhook means you get a URL, you call the URL, and then it triggers the actual runbook. And you can then send a body into that webhook, similar to this, where we have the different fields. I can then read that from JSON into an object, and then I can read the different fields here. And then I can call the other script that executes the robot. Super simple, actually, to use these webhooks. A webhook, when you create it, if we go to the webhook here, I can create a new one. When you create it, you get this URL, which is right here. And you set an expiration date up to 10 years in the future. And this URL you won't get again. So you have to copy it the first time. And this URL is actually all you need to have to actually be able to trigger it, because there is this token on the URL, which is the actual username or password or authentication. So that means that from any system that can do an HTTP call, you can do this. One project I'm working on, well, I've been working on it for, I thought it would take a few months, but now it's a year or so. A little for fun project at home is an Arduino greenhouse monitor. And this Arduino greenhouse monitor should send all information into log analytics in Azure. But that requires me to do HTTPS and authentication. Well, at least HTTPS. And Arduino is not really happy about HTTPS. So what I do is create a function that is HTTP, which then have all the necessary code to actually forward whatever I send to it into log analytics. So in that, it just shows that any device can actually trigger this thing. So what I can do in my Google Assistant is to go in to Dialogflow, into my fulfillment, and I put in the URL for my function here. So this means that when I trigger something in my Google Home or my action here, it will trigger and send the information to that function, and the function can then handle it. So the function then goes, let's see, where was it? right here. The function then goes in and reads whatever I say. First of all, it reads, let's see, there we go. It reads what I say, I'll get back to this in a second, and then we trigger the actual webhook on the runbook and send the JSON that I talked about, right? Okay, so far so good. Let's see if we can, yeah. But one thing that's a bit difficult in voice control is to understand the words that have been said. And it's not just because, I mean, when you do something, when you have a command like the runbook and you can do grab and release, you really want to be strict about that is the two actions you can do. You cannot run this runbook or script without having those actions. And that's why I was using the validate set on that script to do that, as you could see here. Right here, right? But since we are talking about voice commands, well, then you want to say multiple words. So grab could be pick up, could be lift, could be different things. So what I've done here is, first of all, to make two lists of words that we can use for the actions, right? So grab or pick up, lift. And then I found out if I say lift, it sometimes spells it lift, like the company, like if you know that company, a US company, and release or pick up, it actually sometimes hears as pick up in one word. So it's a good idea to have like multiple words for that. So what I do is I have these words here, then I make a list of all the action words here, and then create a regex that says search for any of these words in the text that you receive. So if I have this text in the what's called query text here, which I read from the input, and I can then say, okay, match. If there's no match for any actions, just throw an error here called no action found. But if there is one, then take the match, the action in here. Then we search for a number, because you can say anything in between. You just need to say a number to how long it should run. So we do the same match, and if there's no match, we fail. And if there is a match, we read the match. Then I do a switch here that says if the action is part of actions grab, well, then set action value to grab. If it's part of release list, then set it to release. And then I have the IP address hard-coded here, the length which it picked up, and the action value here. Then I just need to trigger the runbook. I receive a job ID from the runbook, from Azure Automation. That's what you get from one of these webhooks. And then I can generate the response text, where it says, I have ordered Mr. Brick, blah, 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 which value to action we chose, and so on. If there is any error, it jumps to the catch here, and it takes the error and creates an error, an error message that it can say. And no matter if it completes the top or it fails, it'll always go to finally, where we take this text, put into the fulfillment text, make the JSON, and then return whatever we want to say to make the Google Assistant say. Okay, so this was the Mr. Brick action here, or Mr. Brick project. So I've been here and I've set up, what names it should have, and it's called Mr. Brick, and whatever things we can say to it, and it should have a female voice. Unfortunately, there was no robot voice. I was kind of sad about that. Would have been cool. Robot 1, that would be much cooler, but unfortunately not. So inside the dialog flow, the action, I've set up my webhook connection to my function, and from the actual, that's the wrong one, of course, Mr. Brick, I have one called action here, and if we say either go or action, it will actually execute this intent here. The intent has then, first of all, I make a hard-coded value here that says can't connect to function if there is some kind of issue. But in the end here, we have the fulfillment where I have enabled webhook call. So this means that when this action is triggered, it will use the URL from the fulfillment call my function, and then wait for a response. And if it doesn't get a response in time, or if it fails, it will output the standard response instead. Okay, so let's try that. And we'll have this open so we can see the log that it triggers. And we'll have the runbook jobs open, which is this one, like that. And then we'll ask Mr. Brick to go some centimeters. Let's just say it's about 30 centimeters, and I don't know if I can hit correctly. So, hey Google, ask Mr. Brick to go 30 centimeters and perform a pickup.
Sorry, I'm not sure how to help with that yet.
Oh. I mean, if you've been to the zoo yesterday, my voice is a bit rusty, you know. Hey Google, ask Mr. Brick to go 30 centimeters and perform a pickup.
Sorry, I don't understand.
So one thing is that if you have multiple of these things that you do here, what you do is you can test them here, for instance. So we can say, talk to Mr. Brick. Sometimes, because this is not a published version, it's just a test version. See, talk to Mr. Brick doesn't work. Why doesn't it do that? That's because I need to actually make sure it's loaded because I haven't published it yet. So let's try it here instead. There we go. Bye. And we can try it here. Talk to Mr. Brick. Oh. Did I break it? That's typical, you know. What? It's a really nice demo, huh? Usually you click here, test, and it enables the test. Test is now enabled. All right. What did I do? See, an important thing I didn't say was that when you create the actual dialog flow here, you need to go in and select version 2 API. That's really important. Otherwise, you'll have a much more complex. What? It works here, works there. Yep. All right. Okay. Hey Google, talk to Mr. Brick.
All right, getting the test version of Mr. Brick.
Good day.
Go 30 centimeters and perform a grab.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Go 30 centimeters and perform a grab.
I didn't get that.
What? Come on. Action 30, release. Gee, that was better.
I have ordered Mr. Brick to go 30 centimeters and perform a release. Please keep calm and wait for job to finish. Job ID is 2,240 minus 77.
So,
CD4. Don't we all love pronouncing globally unique identifiers?
of course, it should have done a grab, but that doesn't really matter here. We can try once more. So it's running, and it's blinking, which is good. But since it already has an open one, you won't see the actual. So let's try this again. Hey Google, ask Mr. Brick to go 30 centimeters and perform a pickup.
Sorry, I don't understand.
What? Hey Google, ask Mr. Brick to action 30 grab.
Sorry, I don't understand.
All right. Let's try it from here then. All right. Ask Mr. Brick to go 30 centimeters and grab. Yeah, so you see, it's just the text that I had here, and I put the GUID in there, right? Like you heard before. I don't know why it doesn't understand my accent or whatever today. That's typical, you know. This probably works better if you're a native English speaker, but you can actually make different languages too here in here. It doesn't have to be English. There's also German. And like any other thing in the world, there's always sometimes Norway and Sweden, but never Denmark. So, yeah, I know. It's the last thing here. There we go. All right. The final thing I just want to mention, which I didn't have time to show, is that you can actually from here click create a Power App. And a Power App is something that you can actually use from your phone. So the self-service form that I had before, just by clicking create Power App, I now have a mobile version of it. So that's why we could use it for schools, for instance. They could walk around and reinstall classrooms using SCCM or whatever they were using. And yeah, that's about it on that. So let's go back to the final slide. Of course, I have some slides here about the steps that you need to make, so you can read it afterwards. And yeah, and having summaries, just have fun. It's important to have fun. Use Azure Automation because it's so flexible. You can call from the cloud, go into your different environments and so on. And SharePoint is actually a great tool for self-service because it's so simple to set up. Microsoft Flow makes the integration super easy, and the Power App generates a mobile app in minutes. And Azure Functions is great. It doesn't do the same as Azure Automation because Azure Automation triggers a scheduled job that runs, in a high available environment. But you can't in Azure Automation control the response. So when you want to have integrations between APIs, you use a function in between to translate or to respond the way you want to. And then you can use Azure Automation to do the actual work. Yep. And now there's a break. And of course, questions, since I don't have any more time, you can just ask me afterwards, come up and check my stuff, and then have a nice day.